Monsters occupied the Earth, and a family hid underground for over 300 days until they discovered the truth. At night, a little girl named Zoe can't sleep because she heard a scary noise. She and her parents, Ray and Claire, have been hiding in a small school bomb shelter for 300 days, trying to escape from terrifying monsters called breathers. Knowing that the monsters are searching for survivors and hearing someone trying to break into the shelter, Zoe hides under the bed and calls for her mom. Claire, being a good mother, decides to comfort and support her daughter during this difficult time. Noticing that Zoe isn't in her bed, she finds her under the bed and learns that she and her doll Olive had a nightmare where the breathers found them. Claire calms Zoe down and reminds her of the fourth rule of living in the bunker, not to talk out loud about the monsters on the surface. Claire is confident they are safe because Ray, the head of the family, guards the shelter's entrance, protecting his loved ones as they sleep. Zoe is still worried, so her mother suggests they check on Ray to make sure he's handling his duties well. On the way to Ray, Zoe gets scared by every little thing. Whether it's a shadow or the paper cutout figures she made with her dad for New Year's, it's only her father's warm embrace that finally soothes her. The tough situation has forced Zoe to grow up quickly in her thinking and actions, so she asks her dad for a detailed report of his night watch. Ray tries to be both kind to his daughter and remind her she's still a child by turning the boring report into a game. Despite his reassuring story, Zoe decides to check the locks herself to ensure no monsters can get in. Claire is skeptical, thinking Zoe is too young for this, but Ray believes in giving her responsibility because their survival depends on it. Trying to earn her mother's trust, Zoe recites the 4 rules they live by: don't make noise, don't lose control, don't open the hatch, and don't mention the breathers. After Zoe checks the locks and chains, making sure they're secure, the family returns to their dull and difficult routine. Ray lovingly repairs his daughter's torn shoes, reminding her they are humans, not animals, and they must take care of themselves. Trying to create some cheer, Claire lights a kerosene lamp, and its flames reflect off the can lids, making it feel like they have their own little sun. Marking another day through, the family realizes they've been in the shelter for over 300 days since the apocalypse began, during which the breathers took over the world and wiped out all life. Even a mundane task like cutting out a mark turns into a math lesson for Zoe. It is supposed to help her adapt to normal life if she ever gets the chance. During lunch, like any typical child, Zoe refuses to eat beans, wishing for canned peaches instead. Claire is adamantly against it, trying to explain to her daughter that they need to ration their food and not indulge in the tastier items every day. Ray, being too kind and gentle, supports Zoe's wish and holds a mini vote, in which Claire loses. While Ray struggles with a rusty mechanism and fills a bucket with water, Zoe opens the can of peaches only to find it empty. Claire can't believe it at first, but then she finds a hole in the side of the can. Checking their supplies, she discovers 11 more cans with holes, their contents eaten by a rat that got into their shelter through the ventilation shaft. Zoe is scared that the breathers could get in the same way, but her parents reassure her that the monsters are much larger and can't fit through the small opening. During lunch, Zoe falls into a depression because she has no friends, no chance to go outside, and no peaches, thanks to a rat. Her father's anger is sparked by these words, reminding her that she has loving parents and should feel grateful. Ray reminds them that they've managed to survive for 301 days, which is a miracle in itself. He teaches his daughter to appreciate everything they have, even the disgusting beans that keep them alive for another day. After lunch, father and daughter play a board game about magical journeys. Zoe rolls the dice and lands in a familiar place where she had been just before the apocalypse. Ray covers her eyes so she can mentally travel to that place, helping her recall how wonderful it was. Later, Zoe plays cards with her doll while her parents discuss their current problems. Claire realizes their resources are dwindling, but Ray refuses to despair and is willing to do anything to protect their daughter. He's contemplating going to the surface, despite the danger, to restock their food supplies. To distract themselves from their troubles, the couple makes love, struggling through the flood of memories about life before they ended up in the shelter. After lunch, Claire resumes teaching her daughter, making her count and write. Zoe wonders if they are truly the only survivors. For the first time, her mother allows her to use the makeshift periscope, constructed from 2 mirrors, old cans, and tubes. Using it in the ventilation shaft, Zoe looks outside for the first time in 300 days, seeing what's happening around the school shelter. She doesn't see anything suspicious and can't even spot the shelter entrance, as it's well hidden from the breathers. Claire wisely explains that just because they can't see something, it doesn't mean it isn't there. This encourages Zoe, giving her hope that there are still survivors out there and that, sooner or later, they will unite and rebuild civilization. Right after this, Zoe spots the rat returning to the food shelf to eat from another can. Waking up her father, she trusts him to solve the problem. Armed with a knife, Ray attacks the rat but misses. The knife gets stuck in the wood, and Ray can't catch the rodent. Claire, however, decisively handles the thief, killing the rat with a wrench. At the same time, a fire starts because the rat knocked over the kerosene lamp while escaping. The lamp shatters from the heat, igniting the table, and the situation worsens by the minute. Claire uses the curtains to try to put out the fire, but it's no use. Ray manages to fill a bucket with water and extinguish the flames. Noticing that Zoe has disappeared during the fire, the parents search for her and find her under the bed. The little girl is crying, understanding that the breathers will notice them and come to kill the whole family. Ray and Claire realize she's right. The smoke is escaping through the ventilation shaft and could attract the monsters. As they watch the smoke, the family remembers how, shortly before the disaster, they burned bacon on a typical weekend morning. They were planning a trip to the local beach in Kingsville when they learned their neighbors were leaving with the boy Zoe had a crush on. A familiar politician had told them about a terrible virus spreading in North Carolina, causing many residents to flee. Trying to assess the risk of the small fire, Ray uses the periscope to look around for any nearby breathers. Claire panics, fearing the smoke could be seen, but Ray reassures her. He believes the smoke will disperse in time, and the shelter entrance is well hidden, so the monsters won't find it. This seems to bring a bit of optimism, but Claire notices the burned wood, which leaves behind ash and soot. Checking through the periscope, Ray realizes Claire is right, and the ash could give away their presence. With no choice, the parents decide to go to the surface to hide the evidence of their shelter. Understanding the danger, Ray and Claire instruct Zoe not to leave the bunker under any circumstances. Timing themselves to 3 minutes, Ray and Claire head to the surface, knowing it's too dangerous to stay out longer. Curious, Zoe uses the periscope to watch her parents. At one point, she sees someone in the nearby forest and tries to warn her parents. When they don't hear her, Zoe decides to leave the shelter to alert them. The frightened girl shouts, further jeopardizing their safety. It turns out the monsters she saw in the forest are just deer running past them. Claire realizes the animals were scared, indicating something terrible is approaching, so the family hurriedly returns to the shelter, locking the hatch with all the locks and chains. Just a minute later, the family hears a breather approaching. It might have noticed the smoke or seen them cleaning up after the fire, but the crucial thing is it's right above them and not going away. Realizing this, little Zoe panics and starts crying. Her mother tries to calm her down and remind her of the first rule of staying in the shelter, but the girl is overwhelmed by her emotions and fear. Claire is terrified that the breather will hear Zoe's cries and come for them, but her attempts to console her daughter fail. Ray tries to support Zoe and distract her by playing her favorite game. He closes her eyes and suggests she imagines herself in a safe place, creating effects that mentally transport her there. This helps for a moment, but the monster returns and begins prowling right above them again, clearly sniffing something out. Watching its movements, Ray and Claire realize the breather is getting closer to the hatch and might discover it at any moment. Their fear intensifies when they notice that Zoe didn't see a pipe, and the string from her talking doll got caught on one of the protruding bolts. They dread what will happen if the doll speaks, and soon, their worst fear is realized. The doll starts talking loudly, which is dangerous given their situation. While Claire holds Zoe and covers her mouth, Ray tears the doll apart to remove the sound device and destroy it. Zoe cries over the doll, but a few moments later, these problems fade into the background as the breather finds the entrance to the shelter. It tries to open the hatch, which is chained shut, showing inhuman strength. The family's fear grows with each second as the monster pulls at the chains embedded in the concrete base of the shelter. With fewer chains holding the hatch, the family scrambles to find something to lock the entrance. Zoe experiences the scariest moments of her young life while Claire uses all her strength to keep the monster out. Despite getting hit by the chain, she keeps fighting to save her family. Meanwhile, Ray breaks the water drawing device and pulls out a piece of metal pipe to use as a bolt to block the hatch. Seeing the terrifying monster, a frightened Zoe screams, and her father hits it with the pipe before closing the hatch. Having blocked the only way into the shelter, the family feels a brief sense of relief but knows it won't last long with the monster still close by. Moments later, they feel the walls tremble, signaling the arrival of more breathers. As the ground shakes, Ray recalls how shortly before this, they too tried to leave the city. They notice neighbors who had left earlier returning home. Reaching the city exit, they learned that the road ahead was blocked, and the army was ordering everyone to return home due to a quarantine. At that moment, they saw the ground begin to shake, but they didn't yet know what would follow. Right now, monsters are breaking through the hatch and invading the shelter. Desperate for even a few more minutes, the family uses everything they have to defend themselves. Claire smashes a kerosene lamp and sets the curtains on fire to block the corridor. Strengthening their defenses with a metal shelf, they realize there's no way out and no chance of survival. Quick thinking Zoe points out they can escape through the ventilation shaft. Using a periscope, Ray breaks the wooden boards, helping Claire take advantage of their only escape route to the surface. After ensuring it's safe, Claire pulls her daughter out of the shelter. Ray tries to escape last, but his shoulders are too broad for the small shaft. Seeing the monsters approaching the burning shelf, Ray breaks one shoulder to fit through and asks Claire to pull him out. Despite Claire's efforts, the monsters grab him and drag him back into the burning shelter. Realizing Ray is gone, Claire and Zoe are devastated. With the monsters closing in, they have to run for their lives. Eventually, they reach the city limits, where it all began. Here, a helicopter finds them and drops a net weighted with metal balls. Claire and Zoe can't free themselves and are surrounded by breathers. As they come closer, it's clear they're not monsters but soldiers in hazmat suits, tasked with finding and eliminating the infected. Before shooting, the commander orders a blood test to confirm if Claire and Zoe are infected. In a flashback, it's revealed that the tremors were caused not by an earthquake but by military jets destroying the city. The government decided it was easier to kill thousands than let the virus spread across the US. Watching the bombing erase homes, schools, and daycares, people panicked. Those near the city exit saw the jets heading their way, realizing they had only a minute to find safety and survive. Claire remembered the elementary school with a bomb shelter, so they headed there. Finding the hatch, the family hid just seconds before the explosion. Initially, the shelter seemed safe, with books, toys, and food, but Claire dashed their hopes for a normal life. While entering the shelter, Claire cut herself and noticed her blood had turned black. She realized the infection was airborne, and they were all infected. In the present, the soldiers prepare to execute the infected mother and daughter, but Ray, having survived, attacks them. The infection turns them into monsters who look human until angered. Losing control, they become incredibly strong and aggressive, capable of destroying everything in their path. The soldiers couldn't execute Ray in the shelter because he lost control of himself and killed them. Now, Ray continues to protect his family, ready to sacrifice himself. He kills several soldiers, but they eventually shoot him multiple times. Seeing this, Claire loses control, breaks the net, and hides Zoe in an abandoned car. The soldiers search for Claire, but she easily picks them off one by one. The last surviving soldier manages to wound Claire. As he reloads to execute her, Zoe, also turned into a monster to protect her mother, attacks him in retaliation. She spares his life after he loses his mask and gets infected. Calming down and regaining their human forms, Claire and Zoe say goodbye to Ray as he dies. With the helicopter still searching, they hide in the storm drains. In the morning, they're awakened by approaching footsteps. Zoe fears the breathers have discovered them, but it's their neighbor Joey, who found Zoe's jacket and was looking for her. He leads them to an underground hideout where many infected but surviving residents of Kingsville have taken refuge. Realizing life goes on, they join the survivors, continuing to hide from the U.S. Army deep underground. What would you do if you were in the place of the main characters? Share your thoughts in the comments below, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.